Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today, I'm going to update you on some of the completed and ongoing restoration projects that Battleship New Jersey has undertaken in the last couple months or so, and update you on their status. By and large, most of these projects have been put on hold while our staff is safely at home, but don't want you guys to forget what we're doing, because one of the core missions of the museum is to preserve and restore the ship. So here's the state of some of our key projects. First off, let's talk about the deck. If you're interested in the work we've been doing replacing the ship's teakwood deck and the system we're using to do that, check the description down below. We've got some links to earlier videos. Every couple of months we try to update that project because it's such a large and ongoing thing. That project is also grant funded, so that is money already in the bank, and we have continued to work on that while the ship is closed to the public and most of the staff is home. We only have 2 employees who are working on it, a carpenter laying wood and a painter who is treating the steel underneath of the wood and laying down coatings as we rip up the old wood. So the health risk is minimal here. The other thing that makes us want to do this project now is it is less of a risk to our visitors. We don't have to close down part of the tour route or worry about our visitors working through the work site back aft. And we've been able to make tremendous progress over the last couple of weeks on the after part of the ship where we started with this work. Just overall, the project is looking to replace about 50,000 square feet of 2-inch thick teak wood from the main deck of the ship. And that project is expected to take about 5 years and cost around $5 million. Replacing rotting deck wood is also safer for our visitors because it's removing tripping hazards from the deck and making the ship more accessible. Additionally, it is providing another level of insulation, which helps reduce our energy bills. The next project we're working on is bringing back the ship's full complement of boats from the 1980s. Currently, no Iowa-class battleship has all 6 ship's boats on board, and while the museum possesses 6 boats, we only have 4 on board currently. Those 4 are at the davits amidships. There would be another 2 boats, in this case a second Liberty launch and the captain's gig, which would be on rolling carts on the fantail. Like I said, these boats were acquired by the museum years ago, but the necessary work was never done to bring them onto the ship or interpret them in any way. For the longest time, board member Rod Sadler stored the boats for us safely at his marina. Recently, and by recently I mean 6 months to a year ago, we decided we wanted to make that a major restoration effort for the ship, and we started cleaning up those 2 boats, and with the help of Gary Mahan of the Mahan Collection, we were able to transport those boats out of the Sadler Marina at Pine Point in Camden and move them up to his workshop in Basking Ridge. He is building a cart for the captain's gig so that is similar to the one it would have sat on when it was on the ship. And our intention is to bring that boat back onto the ship on the fantail on the port side near the gun turret number 3 and make it so that visitors can get in there if we can restore it well enough. Currently, they cannot get in any of the ship's boats. That's one of the reasons why we started the teaking project back aft on the port side of the ship, so we can get the deck replaced underneath where the boat will go. The second boat we were going to use as a display off of the ship, and Gary Mahan was even able to get the old diesel engine running again. So we're not entirely sure how we're going to use it or where we will display it, but the museum is going to try and restore it as best as possible, and that boat might even go back in the water one day. The ship's boats were not used for abandoning ship. They were there for running the crew back and forth to port or to other ships, things like that, utility work. They weren't lifeboats per se. For emergencies abandoning the ship in the 60s and the 80s, there were inflatable life rafts, over 80 of them, stored on metal brackets around the superstructure of the ship. These life rafts on a traditional ship would be kept in a plastic shell that has a pressure sensor attached so that if the ship were to sink in an instant, the life rafts could automatically deploy. That was tested with New Jersey in the 1960s, but it turns out that the overpressure from firing a 660-pound charge from the 16-inch guns creates a similar pressure wave to a ship sinking and causes the rafts to deploy all over the main deck of the ship. So Iowa-class battleships got a unique zippered bag that would hold their rafts and supplies. And these rafts would be stacked, typically 3 on top of each other, on a rack that was then strapped down to the metal framing, and then it had a pressure sensor attached to the strap. So if you hit the pressure sensor, or if the pressure sensor detected a significant water pressure, it would automatically release the rafts so they could float to the surface and be deployed. Currently, no Iowa-class battleship has any of these 25-man life rafts or life raft bags or anything like that on display. We were able to get one of our employees who served on the ship in Vietnam and who works with fabrics to fabricate a dozen of the zippered bags that the life rafts would go in. And we were able to fill those bags to simulate as if the ship had life rafts. So we were able to fill 4 of the 3 raft racks to show what it would have looked like. But we've got another couple dozen racks like that that are left uncovered. Battleship New Jersey has mounting points all over the main deck for 50 caliber machine guns. These were probably added during the Vietnam War, but were definitely there by the 1980s and could be used to fend off small boats, boarding parties, if we were too close to shore. And so that they were a smaller, more rapidly deployable weapon system than the 5-inch guns, which were the next smallest gun we had on board in the 80s, or the Vietnam deployment. These would often be manned by the ship's Marine detachment, although, depending on the circumstance, they could be manned by sailors. The battleship had mounting points for 8 of these guns around the superstructure. We have gone out and collected the tripod mounts for, I believe, 6 of the mounting points and reinstalled them in place. And we currently have 2 guns on display on the bow. These guns simulate firing, so if you push the trigger, it will actually make a shooting sound, thanks to some work our radio club did on them. However, we would like to get a full complement of guns. A full complement for New Jersey would have probably been 4 guns for the 8 mounts, and you could move them from mount to mount depending on where they were needed. And when they weren't needed, they could be stored safely inside instead of being outside where they would weather. And we are currently working with Naval History and Heritage Command to acquire some demilitarized or replica 50 caliber machine guns, and we are working on fabricating the shields and cradles for these guns so that we can have a full complement around the superstructure of the ship for guests to interact with. Battleship New Jersey's wardroom would have been appointed with 3 or 4 score of tanker chairs. If you look tanker chairs up online, you'll see that they are an old style, like some of them date back to the World War II period, that run for a couple $100 a piece. Very well built government chairs. 2 years ago, we had no tanker chairs in the wardroom. We used plastic fold-in chairs. We were able to scour the ship and find about 30 or so of the blue upholstered tanker chairs that would have been in the wardroom. And at various times, it seems like those had been removed from the wardroom to be used in offices and other spaces on the ship. And it seems like when the ship was decommissioned in 1991, some were probably removed by other ships when they were stripping parts off to be used elsewhere. So we no longer have a full set of these chairs. However, as we went through the ship, we were able to find enough of them to appoint at least 2 of the 5 tables in the wardroom. We were also able to find similar tanker chairs that were upholstered in brown instead of blue, which would have probably been in the Chief Petty Officer's mess. Although they weren't in there, they were scattered all over the ship also. So because these chairs were damaged, we have been working to reupholster them, and it costs... if you're interested in supporting this project, we have been soliciting donations from supporters to cover the cost of reupholstering these chairs, and then we've been putting a little plaque on the chair with an inscription they choose to dedicate the chair to them. And in this way, we've been able to reupholster almost all of the tanker chairs we still have. And we hope one day to get a full enough complement to outfit the entire space. So check the description down below to see how you can support us there. Another project that we've been able to work on now that we don't have visitors coming in is the tiling on the deck outside of the ship's store and just aft of crew's mess. These 2 compartments in extremely bad rain were getting water ingressing through the hatches, and we were able to fix the leak in the hatch to prevent the water from ingressing, but years and years of water getting in had caused the decks in these 2 places to rust. The water managed to get under the tile, soak through the leveling compound, and then rust the steel underneath. When the steel rusts, it creates rust bloom, which then cracks the leveling compound and pops the tile up. And it can rust through the steel deck, which in that space is probably only about a 1/4 inch thick, or was only a 1/4 inch thick in 1942 when it was welded down there. So decades and decades of this had caused the decks to be perforated. Now, because that is how you access the ship's store and part of the tour route, we haven't really been able to do work on that space. So now with the ship closed, when our maintenance staff, who still is coming in during the emergency to check bilge pumps and those sorts of things, when they aren't doing their normal checks, they had some free time where they could work on that deck, and they were able to tear up all of the old tile and leveling compound that was damaged, grind the steel back down to white metal, and then they found that the metal there was perforated, which had allowed water to get to the 3rd deck down below, and they were able to crop out and renew the steel plating there by welding a new piece on, and then they were able to pour new leveling compound and lay new tile. So we've got some pictures here of some of the work there out front of the ship's store that wouldn't have been possible if we were open. And they're now moving from there to the space just aft of that, or excuse me, just forward of that, aft of crew's mess, outside of the ship's G-dunk, which is in similar condition. Another flooring project that we have undertaken since we're closed and visitors aren't on the tour route is recarpeting some of the spaces. A couple of the spaces associated with officers had carpeting. Very few spaces on the ship overall, but a few of them. If you've ever heard the expression "called on the carpet," it's because the captain's cabin traditionally is one of the only places that did have carpeting. So the executive officer's cabin on the ship, the captain's cabin, the admiral's cabin, and the officer's lounge all have carpeting in them, and we've been working through replacing that. It's only good for 5 or 10 years with the number of visitors we have going through and walking on it. So we're replacing it with new carpeting of a similar make, color, and material. Thanks for tuning in today. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and tune back in later for more content. If you'd like to hear other stuff about what we're doing or have questions about this, drop a comment down below. And remember, in the description down below here, there's a section that tells you how you can donate to support the ship. If any of these projects seem particularly interesting to you, we'd appreciate any support you can give us.